Well, after a 16-5 start, the Oilers are 2-10-2 in their last 14 games, and frustrations certainly apparent in the Oilers locker room. We saw it from Captain Connor McDavid on Saturday. As I'm pleased to welcome in Jack Michaels and Bob Stauffer. Welcome to the panel presented by Sportsnet. Now on Tuesday, Jack, it made national headlines across the hockey world. What did you make of what happened in the Oilers media room yesterday?
I made very little of it because it was very little. You almost saw Leon Draisaitl chuckle as he left the podium. It's a tiny flare-up in the midst of an 82-game season. It is no big deal. I found it a little bit humorous that people felt compelled to write articles about how the relationship between the media and the player is broken. It's not broken. This is a very minor thing, and we're at a normal world where that might have, occurred in the dressing room. No one would have known about it, and more to the point, the player and the reporter would have come together and quickly ironed it out on a day like today, another practice day. This is the byproduct of one game in 15 days, and as you indicated, a club that is tired of answering the same questions asked about their slump over and over again, and reporters who are also on edge because they're scrambling to come up with stories to fill this 2-week timeline with no games. This is a team that needs to get back on the ice. This is a team that I believe is facing perhaps its most important 2 regular season games of the Draisaitl-McDavid era. If you can't get up for one of the top 5 teams in the league and the Battle of Alberta, well, then maybe you're not a playoff team. I think the Oilers will respond, and I think this incident is extremely minor within the locker room. And more to the point, they're focused on making this next 48 hours perhaps the turning point of this entire season, because they better be ready.
Bob, just to follow up on that opening question, I know Jim Matheson was on Inside Sports with Reed Wilkins on 6:30 Ched last night, and he talked about this almost being a byproduct of the situation, that, of course, being COVID-19, and not having that access to kind of hash things out between players. Is that how you see it?
I've moved on. So to me, it's over. It's done with, right? Like, it's, to me, and to me, the byproduct is the fact that the team's gone through a very challenging time. And what has to happen in these situations is teams have to dig in to dig out from top to bottom of the organization. We heard Ken Holland say, "Hey, I built this team," and so that management feels that they've got some ownership in this and trying to assist the players. The coaches would tell you there's some things that that they would want to work on and try to grow and develop some players out. The players would tell you, hey, we got to have a better performance here. And there's this isn't like you can just put your finger on one thing and say, well, damn it, that's what's wrong with this team, and they have to, there's some work to do here, and this is the reality of how things work. You go 16-5 and everybody gets credit, and you go 2-10-2 and everybody gets criticism. So it comes with the territory. We're an extension of that in our roles. And I will tell you that it's been my experience over the last 14 years that when the team plays better, the fans like the broadcasters more. And when the team's struggling a bit, the broadcasters that work for the Oilers Entertainment Group are seen as not being critical enough, and it comes with the territory. But those guys have got to have the belief in themselves, and they've got to put the work in. I'm with Jack. I mean, they've got 2 tough games coming up. Yeah. Those are 2 pretty good hockey clubs. And I do have some empathy in terms of, I know there's some people that always want to sort of pin things on Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. To me, hockey's a different sport than basketball, where maybe 2 or 3 players can play, 40 out of 48 minutes a game. Yeah. And I think, frankly, their own teammates would like to accept some more ownership with this as well. So, because to me, it's not on those 2 guys, and so there's some work to be done here. And the Oilers have got to get things turned around and create some positive momentum around their hockey club.
Jack, Bob talked about moving on. The Oilers, of course, looking to move on after Saturday's loss to the Ottawa Senators, but they got a big challenge at hand against one of the league's best teams, that, of course, being the Florida Panthers. Now, they were 8-0-1 heading into last night. The Calgary Flames were able to defeat them last night. So my question to you is, Darnell Nurse talked about bringing this team's goals against average down. They need to do a better job collectively. How do they do that? Of course, goaltending is a part of that, but it's not the only part of that.
Well, it's linked to special teams. I mean, the penalty kill has allowed 14 goals in the last 13 games, and that's linked to the fact that the Oilers, to some degree, aren't drawing a ton of power play opportunities. They got one in their last game, but they haven't had a game where they've gotten on the power play 4 or 5 times, and part of it is, driving straight lines toward the net. Now, I will say, over this stretch, we have seen some improvements from the bottom end of the roster. I mean, 7 of the last 9 games now, players that were dressed in the bottom 6 have scored a goal. So they're getting some production. Bob's made the point on several of our broadcasts that you could see a little more jam, perhaps, from those players and a team that collectively becomes a little bit harder to play against. But I think now that the Oilers are getting healthier, I think they have a chance to more, I guess, more reasonably round out the corners of their game. It is hard to dig your way out of a slump when the lineup is in flux. Now, I'm not taking the Oilers off the hook because every lineup has been in flux this season. This is not unique to Edmonton. But I think in terms of a turnaround, I again go back to the caliber of competition they're going to face. Sometimes, in my experience covering the Edmonton Oilers, they've risen to that level. They've played at times down to the level of their competition, but they've also, when the prospect of perhaps getting run out of their own building arises, they've responded to that challenge. What they need, most importantly, is a solid performance from Mikko Koskinen, and then it goes on its way out. A goaltender and a team is always built from the goaltender on out. If they get a solid performance in net, I think that'll be an extension that carries throughout the whole team. And trust me, they're fired up to play these games. It's been a while. They're looking to break out of this slump, and they're looking to beat 2 legitimate teams, both out of conference and in conference. Remember, this is a club that's 8-2 inside its own division. Don't tell me they're not looking forward to the challenge ahead in the next 3 games to get this back on track.
Yeah, this isn't the 2 Eastern divisions where it's pretty much set in stone who's making the playoffs. The Pacific Division is there to go get. The Oilers still have 47 games left. We think it's going to be in the next 101 days.
Certainly hope so.
Right, and I mean, you can, when the team was 16-5, all 3 goaltenders, even the 3 games that Mike Smith played before he got hurt, 9-14 and better. And over the last, 14 games, 2-10-2, none of the goalies are above 900. But as Darnell Nurse said, collectively as a team, we have to defend better. I think part of it's going to start there. The penalty killing is a little concerning for me, frankly, because it's been such a strong part of the work that Dave Tippett and Jim Playfair have done in the first 2 quarter seasons in Edmonton. So they got some more today. They got to dig out. And again, they're the guys that have got to dig in. And in the meantime, the management's got to be relentless in terms of the potential pursuit of ways to improve the roster. And that's how they can help. And then the coaches have got to, they've got to sit there and continue to try to tinker and work with things to create the best lineup. And one of the advantages they have is they are getting healthier. Maybe not in goal, but they are getting healthier. Kyle Turris back at practice today. Another guy that, if so be, they can go down that path. So we'll see what kind of juice they bring here Thursday and Saturday.
The other thing Bob mentions is they've got games in hand, too. They've got games on their side. They haven't played a ton. Right now, I believe they're something like 6 points out, but with 5 games in hand. Or in the 3rd spot in the Pacific Division, they're 7 points out, but they've got 6 games in hand. Now, you've got to make those games in hand count. I'm not chalking them up as automatic victories. But the bottom line is, throughout a horrible stretch, Edmonton is very much right in the thick of the playoff picture. They have not squandered the fruits of that 16-5 start. It's quite the opposite. That 16-5 start has allowed them to remain in contention through the most difficult stretch of this Draisaitl-McDavid era.
Well, it's been a difficult stretch. They'll have a difficult task at hand, hosting the Florida Panthers on Thursday on Sportsnet. For Jack and Bob, I'm Tony Barr signing off for the panel, presented by Sportsnet.